Bumpy Johnson's loyalty test. The backroom night that exposed a traitor. Harlem, 1:17 a.m., January 1962. The phone rings. Not the one in the club office. Not the one behind the bar. The one in the narrow back room off the kitchen hallway. The phone that never gets calls because nobody outside the circle knows the number. A man stands, walks over, lifts the receiver. He doesn't speak first. Silence. Then a voice. Calm, businesslike. No rush. The voice recites 3 details. The name on a sealed envelope that was only opened twice. The time of a private sit-down scheduled 40 minutes ago. The exact stairwell used to enter the building unnoticed. 3rd floor, west side, past the laundry chute. The caller doesn't threaten, doesn't ask for anything. Just says, "Tell your boss the room is already booked." Click. The man holding the receiver stands there. Sweat on his collar. Ice in his chest. No raid comes. No headlines. No sirens. But the message lands harder than noise. Someone close enough to touch paper is leaking the paper. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1962. By January 1962, Harlem isn't one territory. It's a chessboard. Every block has 3 kinds of power. The loud kind, flash, violence, muscle on the corner. The quiet kind, backroom agreements, envelopes, schedules that keep the nightlife running. And the invisible kind, who gets paid, who gets taxed, who gets protected, and who gets ignored. Bumpy Johnson operates in the 2nd and 3rd categories. He's not a street enforcer anymore. He's the strategist behind the system. The clubs stay open because he keeps them predictable. The runners move cash because he keeps the routes stable. The Harlem economy hums because Bumpy's backroom keeps the noise down and the money flowing. But here's the catch. Predictability is power, until someone learns the pattern. A woman named Ruth works the coat check counter at the Palm Garden Social Club 3 nights a week. She's been there since '58. Knows the regulars, knows the rhythm. Thursday nights are steady, Fridays are loud. Saturdays, the room fills before midnight and stays packed until 3. But something shifts in early January. The laughs get shorter, tips get lighter. Men who used to stay until closing leave early, coats over their arms, eyes on the door. Ruth asks the bartender what's wrong. He just shakes his head, says, "Ask upstairs." She doesn't, but she feels it. The room is holding its breath. File note. No newspaper covered this, no police report filed, but Harlem knew. What we know. A phone rang at 1:17 a.m. in a location known to fewer than 12 people. The caller recited sealed details. Envelope name, meeting time, entry route. No violence followed. No arrests. The caller just delivered proof. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest the caller was a downtown recruiter. Records are unclear. Historians dispute whether the leak came from inside Bumpy's crew or a connected operator. Why it matters. This wasn't about one meeting, it was about certainty. If your backroom isn't secure, your entire operation is negotiable. And that's where the story turns. By 1962, Bumpy's reputation isn't built on headlines. It's built on paper trails and soft power. He doesn't need to be the loudest man in Harlem. He needs to be the one people call when the loud men create problems. He runs numbers, manages club pipelines, keeps schedules tight so money moves without friction, but the system only works if the paper stays internal. The second that paper starts moving outside the room, everything becomes a gamble, and Bumpy doesn't gamble. File note. Follow the cash, and you'll find the pressure. And what we know. Bumpy's operation controlled club cash flow across 7 Harlem venues in early 1962. Weekly intake estimates ranged between $12,000 and $18,000, depending on the season. Disrupting even one night's schedule could bleed 5 to 8% off the weekly total. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest rival crews saw an opening after a downtown policy shift. Others say the pressure was pure opportunism. Records are unclear on whether the leak was targeted at Bumpy or at the broader Harlem network. Why it matters? Harlem ran on belief. If Bumpy's backroom felt penetrable, the money would follow the new certainty. Lose the pattern, lose the pipeline. And that's where the story turns. Ruth's neighbor, a man named Thomas, runs a small print shop 2 blocks from the club. He prints flyers, wedding invitations, church bulletins. On a Tuesday morning, he finds an envelope slipped under his door. Inside, $200 cash and a handwritten note. For last month's paper order. Appreciate your discretion. Thomas never ordered paper last month. He takes the envelope to his wife. She tells him to keep quiet. He keeps quiet, but he knows what it means. Someone is buying receipts that don't exist. Harlem's invisible economy is being mapped. The rival side doesn't want war. War is expensive. War brings attention. War makes the police show up, and nobody wins when the police show up. What they want is erosion. Slow, quiet, surgical. They want Bumpy's crew to doubt him just long enough to accept new terms. And they know how to do it. By the invisible man. Not the enforcer, not the public face, the runner, the scheduler, the man who handles envelopes and knows which stairwell to use. His name is Lloyd. Mid-30s, loyal for 6 years, trusted with schedules, cash drops, and sealed correspondence. He's the kind of man nobody notices because he never makes mistakes. But Lloyd has a problem nobody knows about. His younger brother owes money to a loan operator on the Lower East Side. The debt started at $300. Now it's $1,100 and the interest compounds weekly. Lloyd tried to cover it quietly. Sold a watch, borrowed from a cousin, skipped 2 rent payments. It's not enough. One night in mid-January, Lloyd finishes a cash drop and walks toward the subway. A man steps out of a diner doorway. Well-dressed, calm smile, hands in his pockets. Lloyd, right? Lloyd stops. The man introduces himself as Mr. Carver. Says he's heard Lloyd's been handling some financial stress with grace. Lloyd doesn't respond. Mr. Carver hands him an envelope. Says, "Your brother's debt is handled. Consider it a courtesy between professionals." Lloyd stares at the envelope. Mr. Carver adds, "No strings, just respect." He walks away. Lloyd opens the envelope later that night. Inside, a receipt showing the debt paid in full and a business card with one word written on the back. Listening. A crew member named Marcus has been watching Lloyd for 2 weeks. Marcus is the kind of man who remembers details others miss. A phrase repeated wrong, a matchbook out of place, a man who suddenly stops making eye contact. Marcus notices Lloyd's been arriving late to cash drops. Not by much. 5, maybe 7 minutes. But consistent. One night, Marcus pulls Lloyd aside in the club hallway. "You good?" Lloyd nods. Says he's fine. Marcus says, "You sure?" "'Cause you've been walking different." Lloyd forces a laugh. Says Marcus is seeing ghosts. Marcus doesn't push, but he doesn't forget either. 2 weeks later, Lloyd gets a hospital bill in the mail. His mother had chest pains. Went to the emergency room. The bill is $470. Lloyd doesn't have it. The next morning, he finds another envelope at his apartment door. Inside, cash. Exact amount and a note. "Your mother shouldn't worry. Neither should you." No signature. Lloyd knows who sent it. File note. Every system has a hinge. Find the hinge. Apply pressure. Wait. What we know. Lloyd had been a trusted runner in Bumpy's operation since 1956. He handled sealed correspondence, meeting schedules, and discreet cash movement. By January, 1962. Lloyd was facing compounding personal debts he couldn't resolve internally. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest Lloyd was targeted deliberately. Others say he was simply vulnerable and visible. Records are unclear on whether the initial contact was surveillance-based or opportunistic. Why it matters? Loyalty isn't about ideology, it's about options. Take away a man's options, and you take away his choice. And that's where the story turns. Mr. Carver doesn't ask for anything for 6 weeks. Lloyd starts to believe maybe it was just respect, professional courtesy, a gesture between men who understand the game. Then, in late February, Mr. Carver appears again, this time outside Lloyd's building. Evening, cold. He doesn't smile. He says, "I need a small favor. Nothing illegal, just information." Lloyd's chest tightens. Mr. Carver continues, "There's a meeting Thursday. I need to know what time it starts and which door is being used." Lloyd says he doesn't know about any meeting. Mr. Carver nods, says, "When you find out, leave a message at this number." He hands Lloyd a slip of paper, then adds, "Your mother's follow-up appointment is next month. Would hate for anything to disrupt her care." He walks away. Lloyd stands there, paper in his hand, ice in his stomach. Marcus sees Lloyd leave the building that night. He follows him to a payphone 2 blocks away. Lloyd makes a call. Short, under a minute. Marcus doesn't hear the words, but he sees Lloyd's shoulders drop after he hangs up. The next day, Marcus mentions it casually to another crew member. Lloyd's been making late-night calls. "You notice that?" The other man shrugs. Says everyone's got business. Marcus lets it go, but he keeps watching. File note. They don't buy you with threats. They buy you with solutions. What we know. Lloyd received at least 3 separate financial gifts between January and March 1962. Each gift corresponded to a specific stressor: brother's debt, mother's medical bill, rent arrearage. The recruiter, later identified in accounts as Mr. Carver, never demanded repayment, only information. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest Carver worked for a downtown syndicate network. Others say he was freelance. Historians dispute whether Lloyd believed he was providing minor details or understood he was being leveraged into a larger operation. Why it matters? Betrayal doesn't start with hatred. It starts with a compromise so small you tell yourself it doesn't count. By the time you realize you're owned, the receipts are already filed. And that's where the story turns. Lloyd tells himself it's just information, not money, not product, just details. A meeting time, a stairwell, a name on an envelope. He's not betraying anyone. He's surviving. That's what he tells himself. But here's what nobody explains in the moment. Every piece of information you give becomes a chain. The first link feels light. The second feels manageable. By the third, you can't remember how to put it down. Lloyd tells himself, it's just information, not money, not product, just details. A meeting time, a stairwell, a name on an envelope. He's not betraying anyone. He's surviving. That's what he tells himself. But here's what nobody explains in the moment. Every piece of information you give becomes a chain. The first link feels light. The second feels manageable. By the third, you can't remember how to put it down. Marcus confronts Lloyd directly this time. They're in the club's back hallway. Late, almost closing. Marcus says, "I know you're talking to someone." Lloyd's face goes pale. Marcus continues, "I don't know who. I don't know why, but I know." Lloyd tries to deflect. Says Marcus is paranoid. Marcus steps closer. Says, "I've been running with this crew 8 years. I've seen men break before. You've got that look." Lloyd says nothing. Marcus adds, "Whatever it is, you need to tell Bumpy before someone else does." Lloyd says he'll handle it. Marcus walks away. But the next morning, he reports the conversation to another senior crew member. The word starts moving up the chain. Ruth notices something strange at the coat check counter. A regular customer, a man named Vincent, comes in Thursday night. He's always friendly, always tips, always leaves at 2:30 a.m. But tonight, he asks her a question she's never heard before. What time does the manager usually come downstairs? Ruth says she doesn't know. Vincent smiles. Says, just curious. He leaves at 1:45 a.m. instead of his usual time. Ruth mentions it to the bartender. The bartender says, people ask weird questions when they're drunk. But Ruth doesn't think Vincent was drunk. She thinks he was checking something. Ruth notices something strange at the coat check counter. A regular customer, a man named Vincent, comes in Thursday night. He's always friendly, always tips, always leaves at 2:30 a.m. But tonight, he asks her a question she's never heard before. What time does the manager usually come downstairs? Ruth says she doesn't know. Vincent smiles. Says, just curious. He leaves at 1:45 a.m. instead of his usual time. Ruth mentions it to the bartender. The bartender says, people ask weird questions when they're drunk. But Ruth doesn't think Vincent was drunk. She thinks he was checking something. Ruth notices something strange at the coat check counter. A regular customer, a man named Vincent, comes in Thursday night. He's always friendly, always tips, always leaves at 2:30 a.m. But tonight, he asks her a question she's never heard before. What time does the manager usually come downstairs? Ruth says she doesn't know. Vincent smiles. Says, just curious. He leaves at 1:45 a.m. instead of his usual time. Ruth mentions it to the bartender. The bartender says, people ask weird questions when they're drunk. But Ruth doesn't think Vincent was drunk. She thinks he was checking something. Bumpy starts testing his own crew. He schedules a meeting for Thursday, 11 p.m. Third floor office. He tells 3 different people, 3 different details. Person A hears the meeting is at 11 p.m. Person B hears it's in the 3rd floor office. Person C hears it's about a new cash route. None of the details are true. There's no meeting. Bumpy waits to see which version leaks. Lloyd receives another call from Mr. Carver. This time, Carver's voice is colder. We need confirmation on Thursday's meeting, time and location. Lloyd says he doesn't have that information yet. Mr. Carver says, then get it. Lloyd asks what happens if the meeting doesn't exist. Silence. Then, it exists, Lloyd, and you're going to tell us where. Click. Someone mentioned a Thursday meeting to an outside contact. The detail mentioned 3rd floor office. Bumpy now knows which thread is leaking. Bumpy doesn't confront Lloyd directly. Instead, he begins building a controlled environment. He schedules a real meeting for the following week. He tells Lloyd, and only Lloyd, a specific detail. The meeting will involve a sealed envelope with a name inside. The name is Marcus Holloway. It's a fake name. Nobody in the crew is named Marcus Holloway. If that name appears outside the room, Bumpy has his proof. Bumpy also sends a message through a neutral intermediary to Mr. Carver's network. The message is simple. Interested in a sit-down. Thursday 10 p.m., Palm Garden Backroom. Business terms only. It's bait. If they show up, Bumpy knows they're confident they've got the inside track. If they send a proxy to verify details first, Bumpy knows they're still testing. Either way, the trap is set. Lloyd passes the name Marcus Holloway to Mr. Carver. He does it over the phone. Quick, barely 10 seconds. Hangs up, sits in his apartment, hands shaking. He tells himself it's the last time. Just one more piece of information, and then he's out. That's what he tells himself. But Bumpy already had the first receipt. File note. The best traps don't look like traps. They look like routine. What we know. Bumpy created a controlled leak by feeding Lloyd a fake name, Marcus Holloway. The name was never used in any legitimate crew correspondence. When the name surfaced in external channels, it confirmed Lloyd as the leaking thread. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest Bumpy suspected Lloyd from the first phone call in January. Others say the suspicion developed gradually. Records are unclear on how many other crew members were tested using similar false information tactics. Why it matters? Proof isn't about catching someone in the act. It's about creating a paper trail they don't know they're leaving. By the time Lloyd repeated Marcus Holloway, the trap was already closed. And that's where the story turns. Bumpy doesn't just want Lloyd. Lloyd is a symptom. The recruiter is the infection. And the infection runs deeper than one crew, one phone call, one leak. Bumpy meets with a Harlem landlord who runs properties across 3 blocks. The landlord mentions something strange. A downtown legal firm has been quietly approaching building owners, offering cash for lease listings and tenant rosters. Bumpy asks why anyone would want tenant rosters. The landlord shrugs, says maybe they're mapping who lives where. Bumpy thanks him, leaves. He now understands. The rival side isn't just trying to buy his crew. They're mapping the entire Harlem economy. Lloyd was just one entry point. Bumpy meets with a Harlem landlord who runs properties across 3 blocks. The landlord mentions something strange. A downtown legal firm has been quietly approaching building owners, offering cash for lease listings and tenant rosters. Bumpy asks why anyone would want tenant rosters. The landlord shrugs, says maybe they're mapping who lives where. Bumpy thanks him, leaves. He now understands. The rival side isn't just trying to buy his crew, they're mapping the entire Harlem economy. Lloyd was just one entry point. Bumpy pulls records from a contact in a downtown clerk's office. The name J. Mallory appears on incorporation papers for 4 different front businesses across Manhattan. One of them, a property management firm that handles building contracts in Harlem. Bumpy now sees the bigger picture. This isn't just about stealing schedules, it's about replacing infrastructure. The rival side wants to control Harlem's rent, clubs, and cash routes by owning the invisible paperwork underneath. Lloyd was never the target. He was the doorway. Bumpy calls a private meeting with 2 senior crew members. He doesn't mention Lloyd by name. He just says, "We've got a thread that's been pulled. Thursday night, we're going to cut it clean." One of the crew members asks if there's going to be a problem. Bumpy says, "No problem, just clarity." Lloyd receives a message from Mr. Carver on Wednesday afternoon. The message says, "Thursday meeting confirmed. We're satisfied. You're clear." Lloyd feels relief flood his chest. It's over. He's done. He can walk away. He tells himself he'll distance himself from Mr. Carver. Stop answering calls. Fade into routine. He goes to sleep that night believing he's safe. He's wrong. Bumpy sends a second fake envelope through Lloyd on Wednesday night. This one contains a meeting location. Palm Garden, Backroom, 10:15 p.m. It's intentionally 15 minutes later than the real meeting time. If Lloyd leaks it, the rival side will arrive late, walking into a room that's already mid-operation. Lloyd leaks it. Bumpy sends a second fake envelope through Lloyd on Wednesday night. This one contains a meeting location. Palm Garden, Backroom, 10:15 p.m. It's intentionally 15 minutes later than the real meeting time. If Lloyd leaks it, the rival side will arrive late, walking into a room that's already mid-operation. Lloyd leaks it. File note. Loyalty tests don't announce themselves. They look like another Thursday. What we know. Bumpy scheduled a controlled event for Thursday, March 22, 1962, at the Palm Garden Social Club Backroom. He fed Lloyd false timing information, 10:15 p.m., while the real meeting began at 10 p.m. Multiple crew members were positioned as silent observers to track external arrivals. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest Bumpy intended to expose Lloyd publicly. Others say he planned a quieter internal reckoning. Records are unclear on whether Bumpy anticipated Mr. Carver's physical presence or expected a proxy. Why it matters? The trap wasn't just about catching Lloyd, it was about forcing the recruiter into a visible position. Once Carver showed his face, Bumpy could connect him to the larger operation behind the leaks, and that's where the story turns. The Palm Garden Social Club back room fills slowly. Narrow hallway, one doorman, soft tungsten lamps hanging from the ceiling. The kind of light that makes every face look older, every shadow longer. The room holds about 20 people when it's full. Tonight it's at 15. Enough for witnesses, not enough for chaos. A table sits in the center, single envelope placed dead center, sealed, unmarked. Bumpy sits near the back wall, cigarette in hand, quiet. The crew members filter in. Lloyd among them. Lloyd enters at 10:03 p.m. His collar is damp. He avoids eye contact with Marcus, who's standing near the doorway. Marcus watches him. Ruth is working the coat check counter in the front room. She notices a man she's never seen before walk in at 10:12 p.m. Well-dressed, gray overcoat, calm face, hands in pockets. He doesn't check a coat, doesn't ask for a drink. He just asks where the back room is. Ruth tells him it's private. The man smiles. Says, "I'm expected." He walks toward the hallway. Ruth feels her stomach tighten. She doesn't know why, but she knows something's wrong. The man enters the back room at 10:14 p.m. The doorman lets him through without challenge. The room goes quieter. The man scans the faces, finds Lloyd, nods slightly, then looks at Bumpy. Bumpy doesn't stand. Just gestures to an empty chair. "Mr. Carver, I assume." Carver nods. Sits. The room is silent now, ice in glasses. Smoke curling toward the ceiling. Bumpy says, "I appreciate you coming. Saves us both time." Carver says, "I believe we can find terms that work for everyone." Bumpy nods slowly, then says, "Let's start with something simple. The envelope." He gestures to the table. Inside, there's a name. "I want you to tell me who you think it is." Carver's face doesn't change, but his eyes sharpen. He says, "I'm not here to play games." Bumpy says, "Neither am I, but I need to know we're working with the same information." Carver glances at Lloyd. Lloyd's face is white. Marcus steps forward from his position near the door. He says, "Lloyd, you want to tell everyone what's in the envelope?" Lloyd stammers. Says he doesn't know. Marcus says, "Really? Because you mentioned a name yesterday." Marcus Holloway. "Remember?" The room shifts. Men turn to look at Lloyd. Lloyd shakes his head. Says he never said that. Marcus says, "You did. To me. In the hallway. You said the meeting was about Marcus Holloway." Lloyd's breathing gets shallow. Bumpy still hasn't moved. Just watches. Carver realizes the trap a half-second too late. He stands. Says, "This is a waste of time." Bumpy finally stands too. He says, "Calm, steady. You came 15 minutes late because that's the time Lloyd gave you. But the meeting started at 10, which means you trusted information from a man who didn't know he was feeding you bait." Carver's jaw tightens. Bumpy continues, "Marcus Holloway doesn't exist. Never did. The only person who ever heard that name was Lloyd. And now you." The room is frozen. Bumpy picks up the envelope, opens it. Inside, a blank piece of paper. He holds it up. There was never a name. Just a test. He looks at Lloyd. A man talks. Paper remembers. The room exhales collectively. Lloyd's knees buckle. He grabs the edge of the table. Marcus doesn't touch him. Nobody does. Carver looks at Bumpy. His face is stone. He says, "This doesn't change anything." Bumpy says, "It changes everything. You walked into my room, in front of witnesses, based on information you paid for. That's not strategy. That's desperation." Carver says nothing. Bumpy adds, "And now everyone here knows who you are, which means everyone in Harlem will know by morning." Carver turns toward the door. Bumpy says, "One more thing." Carver stops. Bumpy says, "Tell J. Mallory the room was already booked." Carver's face flickers. Just for a second. Then he walks out. File note. The climax wasn't loud. It was surgical. What we know. Carver entered the Palm Garden back room at 10:14 p.m. on March 22, 1962. Bumpy revealed the Marcus Holloway name was false bait, confirming Lloyd as the leak. Approximately 15 crew members and club associates witnessed the exchange. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest Carver was escorted out forcibly. Others say he left voluntarily under implicit threat. Records are unclear on whether Bumpy intended to let Carver leave alive or if the public setting forced restraint. Why it matters. The trap worked because it was witnessed. Carver's exposure wasn't private, it was communal. By morning, every operator in Harlem knew the rival network had been played. And that's where the story turns. Ruth watches Carver leave through the front room. His face is tight. His hands are shaking slightly. She's never seen a man walk that carefully, like every step might break something. The bartender leans over, whispers, "You just saw history." Ruth doesn't respond, but she understands now. The quiet order she's depended on for 4 years wasn't luck. It was work. And tonight, the work showed its teeth. The room doesn't feel scared. It feels certain again. Lloyd is escorted out of the back room by 2 crew members. Not roughly, just firmly. He doesn't resist. Marcus watches him go. One of the crew members asks Marcus, "You want us to handle it?" Marcus says, "That's not my call." Bumpy says quietly, "Take him to the apartment on 132nd. Keep him there. I'll decide tomorrow." The crew members nod. Lloyd is gone. Bumpy stays in the back room for another 20 minutes. The crew gradually disperses. A few men shake his hand. Nobody asks questions. Bumpy lights another cigarette. One of the senior crew members approaches, says, "What about Carver?" Bumpy says, "Let him run. He's more useful as a message than a body." The crew member nods. Leaves. Bumpy sits alone in the room. The envelope still on the table. Blank paper inside. He stares at it. A match struck. A life changed. A network exposed. All because someone repeated a name that never existed. By Friday morning, the story is moving through Harlem like smoke. Not in headlines, not in police reports, in barbershops, diners, street corners, stoops. A man named Jerome runs a newsstand on 125th Street. Friday morning, a regular customer mentions the Palm Garden. Says, "Heard Bumpy caught a rat last night." Jerome asks how. The customer grins. Says, "Fed him fake cheese. Rat took it straight to the exterminator." Another customer overhears. Adds, "They say the exterminator walked right into the trap in front of everybody." Jerome shakes his head. Says, "That's cold." The first customer says, "That's smart." By noon, the story has 3 versions. By evening, it has 6. But the core stays the same. Bumpy Johnson turned a leak into a lesson, and everybody watched. A woman in a beauty salon repeats the story to her stylist. The stylist says, "What happened to the man who talked?" The woman says, "Nobody knows, but nobody's seen him since Thursday." The stylist says, "And the recruiter?" The woman says, "Ran like his shoes were on fire." They both laugh, but it's not a happy laugh. It's a relieved one. The kind of laugh you make when you realize the roof isn't leaking anymore. Saturday afternoon, Bumpy calls a meeting with his senior crew. 6 men. Private apartment. No outsiders. Bumpy doesn't sit at the head of the table. He sits in the middle. He says, "We had a problem. It's handled. But we're going to talk about how it happened." One crew member says, "Lloyd was solid for 6 years. How'd we miss it?" Bumpy says, "We didn't miss it. We just didn't see the pressure until it was applied." Another crew member asks, "What do we do different?" Bumpy says, 2 things. First, we stop assuming loyalty is permanent. It's not. It's conditional. The second people's conditions change. Their loyalty becomes negotiable. He pauses. Second, we tighten the paper. Every envelope, every schedule, every name gets verified twice. If you're moving information, someone else confirms it. No exceptions. Marcus says, "What about Lloyd?" Bumpy is quiet for a long moment, then says, "Lloyd made a choice. He thought he could play 2 sides. He was wrong, but he's not the enemy. He's the warning." Marcus asks, "So what happens to him?" Bumpy says, "He's gone, out of Harlem, no harm, no noise, just gone." The crew accepts it. One man asks, "And Carver?" Bumpy says, "Carver's a messenger now. He'll go back to whoever sent him and explain how badly they miscalculated. That's more useful than erasing him." The crew nods. Bumpy adds, "But we're not done. Carver worked for someone bigger, someone named J. Mallory, and Mallory's got infrastructure we need to understand." He slides a folder across the table. "This is what we know so far. We're going to map the rest." Monday morning, somewhere in a lower Manhattan office building, Mr. Carver sits across from a man he's never met in person before. The man is older, gray suit, reading glasses, calm. The nameplate on the desk says J. Mallory and Associates. Mallory doesn't look up from the file he's reading. He says, "Walk me through what happened." Carver explains. The phone call, the fake name, the back room, the witnesses. Mallory listens without interrupting. When Carver finishes, Mallory closes the file. He says, "You walked into a controlled environment based on unverified intelligence from a compromised source." Carver says, "I didn't know he was compromised." Mallory says, "That's the problem." Silence. Mallory stands, looks out the window. He says, "Bumpy Johnson just taught us something valuable. He doesn't react. He engineers outcomes. That makes him more dangerous than anyone who leads with force." Carver asks, "What do we do now?" Mallory says, "We stop trying to buy him from the inside. If we want Harlem, we'll need to offer him something he can't refuse from the outside." Carver asks, "What's that?" Mallory says, "Legitimacy, access, a seat at a table bigger than Harlem." He turns back to Carver. "This isn't over. It's just starting differently." File note. The leak was closed, but the network it revealed was bigger than one recruiter. What we know. Lloyd was removed from Harlem. Accounts suggest he relocated to Philadelphia under quiet terms. Carver returned to his sponsor, later identified in underworld accounts as J. Mallory, a property front operator. Bumpy restructured internal verification protocols to prevent single-point information leaks. What's disputed? Some accounts suggest Lloyd was harmed. Others say Bumpy enforced a clean exit to avoid police attention. Records are unclear on whether Mallory's network attempted further Harlem operations or pivoted to indirect influence strategies. Why it matters. The loyalty test wasn't just about catching a traitor. It was about exposing the infrastructure behind the betrayal. By forcing Carver into the open, Bumpy mapped a network he could now monitor, counter, or negotiate with. And that's where the story turns. Bumpy receives an envelope at his apartment, unmarked, no return address. Inside, a single card, expensive paper, embossed lettering, It reads, "An invitation to discuss mutual interests. Atlantic City, April 14th. Attendees include representatives from New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia. Your presence is requested." No signature. But Bumpy recognizes the stationery. It's the same kind Jay Mallory uses. He sets the card on his desk, stares at it. The paper trail just got longer. Here's what the loyalty test taught Harlem. Noise is optional. Timing is everything. You don't need to be the loudest man in the room. You need to be the one who controls what the room knows. Betrayal doesn't start with hatred. It starts with a small compromise. A debt paid, a favor granted, a detail shared. By the time you realize you're owned, the receipts are already filed. Bumpy Johnson didn't win that night because he was violent. He won because he understood something his enemies didn't. In this world, paper remembers longer than people. And if you control the paper, you control the truth. But here's the question nobody asked in 1962. What happens when the paper trail leads outside Harlem? When the backroom game becomes a boardroom negotiation? When the enemy isn't a recruiter with envelopes, but a network with lawyers, politicians, and interstate infrastructure? Bumpy just proved he could outthink a downtown operator. But the invitation on his desk isn't from downtown. It's from a table where the rules are written by men who've been playing longer, quieter, and with more power than anyone in Harlem has ever seen. The loyalty test is over. The next test is bigger. If you think Bumpy should have handled Lloyd differently, or if you've got your own story about loyalty under pressure, drop it in the comments. This channel runs on real conversation, not algorithms. Hit subscribe if you want the next episode, because what happens in Atlantic City changes everything. Next time, the envelope from elsewhere. When Bumpy gets an invitation to a sit-down that shouldn't exist, he has to decide: protect Harlem with a quiet partnership, or walk into a room where every handshake is a contract. The back room was just practice. The boardroom is where empires are made.